Dating apps are weird. You swipe, you match, and sometimes you meet someone who seems almost too into you. That was Brielle. She was 30, I was 23. We matched on Hinge. Her photos were soft and artistic, nothing over the top. Her vibe was quiet, introspective. Her bio read, "Looking for depth, not distractions." I thought that was refreshing. We set up a dinner date at a local Italian place. She had trouble finding it, so I shared my location to help her navigate. That was mistake number one. When she pulled into the lot in a beat-up Honda, I felt the first flicker of doubt. She looked older than her photos. Still her, but not quite. I walked up to say hi, and went in for a hug. "I'm not a hugger," she said, stepping past me. "Okay." We sat down. From the jump, she was distant. Her voice would randomly spike in volume, especially when talking to the waitress. She didn't want wine, just water. The conversation was awkward. She asked questions like, "What do you fear most about being alone?" I said something like, "Being forgotten." She replied, "You don't seem forgettable." Dinner ended. I paid. She didn't offer to split. I said goodbye. She said nothing, just walked to her car. I drove home, relieved the weird tension was over. Then my doorbell rang. I looked through the window. It was her. Somehow, she had driven straight from the restaurant to my apartment. I hadn't turned off location sharing. I didn't answer the door. I crouched in the kitchen. My phone buzzed. "Brielle, I know you're home." I replied, "Why are you here?" She wrote back, "Answer." I didn't. Then, "I see you at the table. Let me in." I scanned the windows. One in the kitchen had the shades slightly up. That's where I saw her eyes, watching me. I ran to my bedroom, locked the door, called 911. While I was on the phone, I heard glass shatter in the kitchen. "She's breaking in," I whispered. The 911 operator told me to stay put. More messages came. "You're just like the others." I'm done being ignored. Then, pounding on my door. "Let me in." I held my breath, clutching a baseball bat. Sirens arrived minutes later. When I opened the door, 4 officers were in my living room. Brielle was in cuffs. They found a knife in her coat. Later, I learned her real name wasn't Brielle. It was Pamela Castillo. She had a record, trespassing, harassment, even a prior restraining order. I didn't press charges, but I filed for a restraining order. I've never left location sharing on since, and I always lower the blinds. 5 years ago, my sister Erin went on a Tinder date that none of us would ever forget. It was a Friday night in early winter. Erin, then 24, was between boyfriends and feeling adventurous. She told Leah and me that she was meeting a guy named Chris at a bar downtown, just a few blocks from home. I remember her standing in front of the mirror, applying her signature red lipstick, saying, "He seems normal. Cute, in a safe way." She left around 8:30. By 9 o'clock, we got the first text in our group chat. "Guy hasn't shown yet. Creepy man sat next to me. Smells like vinegar." I said no thanks. We laughed at her dramatic flair, but then she added, "He won't leave. Just moved to a booth behind me. Still watching." That's when I felt it. That subtle shift in your stomach when something harmless turns into something wrong. Leah told her to talk to the bartender. Erin said she had. The guy just wouldn't go away. She texted her date. "Hey, I'm here. Sitting at the bar." No reply. 10 minutes later. "Where are you?" Finally a response. "Running late. Grab a drink or 2 without me." That alone felt strange. What guy encourages a girl to drink alone? Erin texted us, "This feels off." And then it got worse. The man from before returned to the bar stool beside her. Asked where her date was. Made comments about how she was still alone. Erin asked him to leave her alone again. He didn't. She texted Chris one more time. "Sorry, I'm going to leave." As she hit send, she noticed the man's phone, left on the bar, buzzed. It was her message. She froze. Didn't react. Didn't panic. Instead, she stood up and said she had to use the bathroom. From the stall, she called Leah. I was there too. She whispered, "It's him. The guy. He's Chris. He catfished me." Leah told her to get out. Not to go back to the bar. Erin left through the back exit and drove straight home. When she walked through the front door, she was pale and silent. She peeked through the blinds and said, "There was a car following me. It stopped one house over." We all looked out. Nothing. That night, she told us everything. About the man, the phone, the fake profile. We sat on her bed, trying to process it. Then, hours later, she screamed. We all ran to her room. She had just received another text from that number. "Sorry, I didn't see your texts until I got to the bar." She didn't respond. Then, "I'm going to meet you at your house. Which window is yours?" While reading it aloud, her window slid open. Someone was trying to lift the roller shade. She and Leah screamed. I ran in. Our dad stormed down from upstairs with a baseball bat. He ran outside, but the man was gone. We called the police. Aaron showed them the texts. They traced the number to a texting app, untraceable. We never heard back. To this day, I don't know what that man wanted. But I know how calculated it was. How close he got, and how lucky Aaron was to trust her gut. Raphael didn't walk into rooms, he arrived. There was something in the way he carried himself, like gravity bent differently around him. Not arrogance exactly. Something older. Quieter. Like he was always half a step ahead of everyone else in the room, and didn't need to prove it. I met him at a gallery opening I hadn't planned to attend. My friend had dragged me there, promising free wine and people who smell like wealth. I was halfway through a glass of something dry and pretentious when I noticed him standing near a sculpture, a tangle of metal and shadows. He had one hand in his pocket and the other resting on his chin, like he was trying to hear what the art was saying. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not wide, just enough. "You look like someone who doesn't pretend to like things," he said. I laughed. "And you look like someone who always does." That was the beginning. He asked if I wanted to leave. We walked for hours through the city. He told me stories that didn't feel like stories, they felt like secrets. He said he'd grown up everywhere and nowhere, that he spoke 4 languages and none fluently enough to dream in. He said his job was complicated, smiled when I asked for details, and changed the subject to mine. When we kissed, it was like falling through silk. He tasted like confidence, and something I couldn't name. He didn't text. He called, always at odd hours. Once at 2 a.m., just to read me a passage from a book he said reminded him of my voice. Another time, he showed up outside my apartment with coffee and a record he claimed he found in a market in Lisbon. I didn't know if I believed him, but I wanted to. That's the thing with men like Raphael. You want to believe them. Their words are soft hooks. Their touch is the net. He moved slowly but deliberately. We didn't sleep together until the 3rd week. He said he liked to build tension. I didn't argue. When we did, it was slow and cinematic, like he'd choreographed it somehow. No awkwardness. No hesitation. Just a rhythm that felt rehearsed in the best possible way. He whispered things in French I didn't understand. Tied my wrists once, not tightly, just enough, and said, "Trust only what I show you." I laughed. He didn't. After, I asked him what he did for work, again. He said, "I consult." For what? For people who don't like being found. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. He stayed the night. Slept like a man unbothered by the weight of anything. I lay awake beside him, tracing the outline of his shoulder with my fingertips, wondering how someone could feel so present and so far away at the same time. The next morning, he was gone before I woke up. A note on the pillow, "You're more dangerous than you think." That became his pattern. He'd appear, intense, attentive, perfect, and then vanish. Sometimes for a day, sometimes for a week. When I asked, he'd smile and say, "I had to disappear for a bit. You understand, don't you?" I did. Until I didn't. Things started to feel off. His phone never rang. He never posted. He didn't exist online, not really. No LinkedIn. No Facebook. No Instagram, except a profile with 2 photos and no tags. I Googled his name. Nothing. Once, I asked to take a photo of us together. He laughed and said, "Some faces are better in memory." Another time, I caught a glimpse of his wallet. Multiple IDs. Different names. When I asked, he said, "Ever heard of immersive theater? Sometimes I play roles." I wanted to believe it was performance art, but the longer I stayed, the more it felt like performance, period. I noticed small inconsistencies. He once said he was born in Barcelona. Later, he mentioned growing up in Montreal. He told me he didn't drink whiskey, then took a neat pour without blinking. He claimed he didn't like animals. But then I found a photo, buried in a drawer, of him holding a dog, looking happier than I'd ever seen him. He had an answer for everything. "You're misremembering." I was being poetic. I like keeping parts of myself hidden. It makes the ones I show more valuable. I confronted him once, really confronted him. "Who are you?" I asked. He smiled. "Who do you want me to be?" That's not an answer. He leaned in, kissed my neck, whispered, That's all any of us are, reflections. I should have left then, but I didn't. Because there were moments, brief, blinding moments, when he held me like I was his only tether to the world. When he looked at me like he was trying to burn my image into his mind. When he said things like, "I've never let anyone see this much of me," and I believed him. Then one night I followed him. He said he was going to meet a client. Left in a hurry. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my coat and called a car. I watched him enter a hotel. Not a business hotel. A boutique one with mood lighting and a bar full of people who didn't use their real names. I waited. An hour later, he exited with a woman. She was tall, elegant, laughing at something he said. He brushed her hair back with the same hand he used to trace my spine. They walked down the block. She slipped her hand into his. He didn't pull away. I stayed frozen. He didn't see me. I went home. He returned the next day, kissed me like nothing had changed. I didn't say a word, but I started digging. I found more. An email account linked to multiple usernames. A burner phone in his coat pocket. A profile on a dating site under the name Nico. Same face, different city listed. I messaged. He responded. Didn't recognize me. Said his name was Nico. Said he was in the import-export business. Asked if I liked red wine and poetry. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I wrote, "I already know how this story ends." He unmatched me. I didn't confront him again. I didn't need to. I just left. Packed my things while he was gone. Deleted every message. Burned the note he left on my pillow that first night. He didn't call. Didn't text. Didn't try to find me. Dom's voice was the kind that made you want to confess things. Low, deliberate, with a softness around the vowels that made even the most ordinary sentence sound intimate. He would say something like, "Pass the salt," and I'd feel a warmth in my stomach. When he whispered, it wasn't for secrecy, it was ceremony. I remember the first time he whispered in my ear, something about how I tasted, and I forgot what I was supposed to be embarrassed about. We met on an app. His first message wasn't clever or desperate. It was a question. What part of you do you like the least? I laughed, then stared at the message longer than I should have. I answered honestly, my overthinking. He replied with, "That's usually just evidence of depth." He was like that. Disarming. Reflective. He made you want to lower your guard, just so he could admire the shape of your vulnerability. Our first date felt like a secret kept from the rest of the world. A dim-lit bar with velvet booths and music you had to lean in to hear. He tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear like it was instinct. When he kissed me, he paused first, hovering, waiting, like he was asking and answering the same question all at once. The first night we slept together, it was quiet and slow, like he was trying to memorize me by touch. He kissed the inside of my wrist, spoke between the spaces of my breath. He didn't ask for permission, he listened for it. And when he finally moved inside me, he held my gaze like it mattered more than anything else on earth. After, he curled around me and whispered, "You're safe now." I hadn't realized I'd been waiting to hear that from someone. Dom was attentive in a way I hadn't experienced before. He noticed when my knuckles tensed. He asked how I liked my tea not just once, but 3 different ways, depending on my mood. He remembered what I wore the night we met, down to the chip polish on my thumbnail. He said things like, "I want to know your patterns," and I thought, finally. He made me feel chosen. But love that glows too brightly at the start often comes with shadows. It began with small things. Flickers. A comment here, a question there. You didn't text back for a while. Everything okay? I saw you liked that guy's post. Do you know him? You looked really happy in that old photo with your ex. Just saying. At first, I thought it was sweetness. Attention. Proof that he cared. He told me he'd created a playlist for me. For when we're apart. It was full of soft, slow songs, some I'd never heard, some I already loved. I listened to it at night, alone, and imagined his hands tracing the length of my spine, the way he did when we were tangled in his sheets, his breath hot against my neck. Then he started asking for things. "Can I have your passcode? Just in case. Emergencies. It would make me feel better if I had access to your Instagram. Just transparency, right? I'd never go through your stuff, I just like knowing I could." He said it with a smile. With a kiss. With that same voice he used when he told me I was beautiful with my hair messy and my mascara smudged. I gave him what he asked for. Love, I'd convinced myself, meant openness. No doors locked. No tabs hidden. He started tagging me in everything. Commenting on every post. If I didn't respond quickly, he'd text things like, "You're pulling away," or "Did I do something wrong?" I'd reassure him, again and again. I stopped posting certain things, stopped following certain people. He said, "I love how much you care about my feelings." There was one night, months in, when he asked me to send a photo. Not just a selfie, something more intimate. I hesitated. "I just want to feel close to you," he murmured over the phone. "You're mine, right?" I sent it. He replied instantly, "God, you're perfect." The next morning, he texted, "You looked a bit hesitant in that photo. Everything okay?" I brushed it off, said I was just tired. He sent a heart emoji and said, "You don't have to pretend with me." From that point on, everything I sent him, photos, messages, even jokes, felt like evidence. He began bringing things up that I hadn't shared. Conversations I'd had with friends. DMs I hadn't mentioned. "You said you were going to bed early, but you were still online. You told your friend you were unsure about something. Was that about me? I know you deleted a message, why?" I asked how he knew. He just smiled. "I'm just good at reading you." The walls closed in slowly. He installed a couples app on our phones. Said it was for syncing calendars, sharing notes, grocery lists. But it showed location, screen time, even what apps I was using. I told myself it was normal, that we were just close. That modern love looked different now. Then one night, I woke up and saw him holding my phone. He didn't flinch. Just said, "You were twitching in your sleep. I thought you had a nightmare." He kissed my cheek and handed the phone back. I told myself to breathe. But something cracked. I started saving things, screenshots, voice notes, backups. Just in case. The worst came when I tried to leave. I told him gently that I needed space. That I felt watched. That something had shifted. He didn't yell. He didn't cry. He just said, "If you walk away, I won't be responsible for what happens next." I froze. He added, "Let's not make this ugly. You've sent me things. Things that are intimate. I wouldn't want you to be embarrassed." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise in disguise. I left that night. Brock had perfect teeth, which in hindsight should have been the first red flag. These were the kind of teeth that made you deeply aware of your own. Immaculately white, unnaturally straight, just a little too symmetrical. You don't get teeth like that by accident. They're a choice. A performance. I met him at a mutual friend's birthday thing. One of those rooftop gatherings where everyone's pretending not to be cold and someone's always talking about microdosing. He offered me a drink and asked if I believed in emotional minimalism. I didn't know what that meant, but I said yes because I didn't want to sound like someone who clutters. Brock had that kind of charisma that works in small doses, measured eye contact, gentle voice, a way of repeating your name like it was a mantra. He told me he worked in relational strategy. I nodded. Later I'd find out that meant he ran workshops on dating dynamics. At the time, I assumed it was HR for poly people. We started seeing each other. Slowly, then all at once. He was attentive in a way that felt curated. Texted every morning. Listened with his head tilted, like he was tuning into a frequency only I emitted. He used phrases like holding space and conscious intention. On our third date, he made me a smoothie with ashwagandha and kissed me like he'd studied my mouth. At some point, he mentioned the gatherings. "It's not a group," he said. "It's more like a community." I asked what they did. He smiled. "We practice." "Practice what?" "Connection. Boundaries. Relational clarity. Those are the kinds of words that sound like nothing, but feel like everything." I went with him to one. Just to see. It was held in a loft with too many rugs. People sat barefoot in a circle, sipping kombucha and nodding a lot. There was an opening ceremony. Someone rang a bowl. A woman named Elin led a meditation where we visualized our attachment styles as animals. Mine was a fox, apparently. Brock's was a hawk. Afterward, we broke into pairs and did something called eye gazing. You just stare into someone's eyes for 2 minutes without speaking. It's supposed to build connection. My partner smelled like fennel and sadness. I cried. He didn't blink. I told myself it was weird, but not dangerous. People join yoga cults all the time and come out fine. I kept going with Brock. It made him happy. And honestly, there was something about it I liked. The structure, the language, the way everyone seemed so certain of what they were doing. It was like stepping into an alternate universe where people didn't just date, they optimized. After a few weeks, Brock suggested we define our dynamic. I thought he meant a relationship talk. What he meant was a contract. He pulled out a printed document with bullet points. Things like, We agree to check in every 72 hours with a 1 to 10 emotional inventory. We will not use sarcasm in moments of misalignment. We will not text during integration windows. I didn't know what an integration window was, but I signed it. It felt easier than asking. That's how it started. Soon, everything was language. We didn't argue, we had ruptures. We didn't break up, we transmuted the container. If I cried during a conversation, he'd say, "Let's pause and return when we've both re-regulated." He never raised his voice. He just spoke in soft, polished sentences that made me feel unreasonable for being human. I started attending more gatherings. They weren't optional, really. If I skipped one, Brock would say he felt disoriented in our shared field. If I questioned something Elon said, I was resisting the mirror. Eventually, I stopped questioning. It was easier to nod, to smile, to write down the phrases and repeat them back. We did contact improv. We did authentic relating games. We did a group exercise where we had to rank each other's relational readiness. Brock said I scored a 6.4. Elon got a 9.7. I started to feel like I was failing at something I didn't know I was trying to do. I lost touch with my friends. They didn't understand. They said Brock was controlling, that the group felt off. One friend called it a dating cult, and I laughed too hard and didn't text her again. Brock told me they were projecting, that when people saw someone leveling up, they reacted with fear. "You're expanding," he'd say. "Not everyone can hold that." I repeated it to myself when things felt wrong. "You're expanding. You're just uncomfortable because you're growing." But the discomfort didn't go away. It got deeper, quieter, like a toothache you forget to treat until it spreads into your jaw. There was a night, months in, when I found a notebook on Brock's desk. It wasn't hidden exactly, but it wasn't out either. I opened it. Inside were pages of notes. Not about work. About people. Scores. Observations. Jane, avoidant, emotionally porous. Good candidate for soft pairing. Marta, high volatility, needs mirroring. Use Elon as bridge. And my name. C, initially skeptical, responsive to language. Needs consistency to override doubt. Could be core member if trust is reinforced. I sat there, staring at the words. I didn't feel rage. I felt hollow, like I'd been mapped, measured, filed. I confronted him the next day. He didn't deny it. He said, "I'm creating relational architecture. It's not manipulation, it's design." I felt myself slipping away from the conversation, like I was watching it happen from above. He said, "You're triggered. That's okay. Don't make meaning in the rupture." I said nothing. He said, "Let's talk when you're back in your window." I left. Not just his apartment, everything. The gatherings, the language, the people who called each other reflections. It wasn't clean. I had withdrawals. I missed the structure, the rituals, the way it felt to be inside something that promised clarity, even if it delivered control. It took months to stop speaking in their dialect. Even now, I catch myself saying "hold space" and want to bite my tongue. Tim was the kind of man who made domesticity look cool. He wore aprons without irony, kept a spice rack alphabetized, and could fold fitted sheets with a magician's flair. He made playlists for weeknights and playlists for weekends, and he labeled them accordingly. His apartment, our apartment, eventually, smelled like cedar and lemon and always had at least one candle burning. I used to joke that he was like a Pinterest board that had come to life. He'd smile, kiss my forehead, and say, "That's because I curate my chaos." He was quirky in the way that made people lean in. A little too obsessed with niche documentaries. Fond of old typewriters, though he never wrote. Took long walks at night, and came back with stories about conversations he overheard. He knew the baristas at 3 different cafes by name and carried cash in an envelope labeled spontaneity. I moved in after 6 months. It wasn't a big conversation. We sort of drifted into it. My lease ended. His apartment had space. He said, "You already live here, just without a drawer." I packed up my things and came with a suitcase full of sweaters and a heart full of certainty. At first, it was easy. We cooked together, slept tangled, had morning rituals that felt like choreography. He brewed the coffee. I toasted the bread. He kissed my shoulder while reading the news. I wrote little notes on napkins and tucked them into his coat pockets. It felt like a life, something real, something rooted. But then little things began to shift. Subtle, like the temperature in a room dropping a few degrees. He started locking the second bedroom. I noticed it one Saturday when I went to put away a box of books. The door was shut, and the handle wouldn't turn. Storage overflow, he said without looking up from his laptop. Just junk. You wouldn't want to see that mess. I nodded. It made sense. He was a collector of odd things, after all. Old radios. Broken clocks. A taxidermy bird he swore he rescued from a flea market. I didn't push. But after that, he started spending more time in there. Late at night, I'd hear him moving around. Dragging something. Whispering? Maybe just the floorboards creaking beneath his weight. When I asked, he said he was reorganizing. It's therapeutic, he said. My version of yoga. I laughed. He kissed me. I wanted to believe him. Then came the visitors. Not friends. Not delivery people. Strangers. They'd come late, sometimes past midnight. I'd hear the buzz of the intercom, the low murmur of voices in the hallway. Once, I caught a glimpse of a man with a shaved head and a duffel bag. Another time, a woman in a hoodie who looked around like she was trying not to be seen. Friends from a mutual aid group, Tim said when I asked. Mutual aid for what? He shrugged. Housing insecurity. Some of them just need a place to crash for a night or two. It was noble. It was vague. I told myself he was kind, generous, that I was lucky to be with someone who cared. But the visits became more frequent and longer. Once, I woke up and found a stranger in the kitchen. A man in his 20s, barefoot, drinking juice straight from the carton. He looked at me like I was the intruder. Tim said I could stay, he mumbled. I nodded and went back to bed. When I mentioned it later, Tim said, he's harmless. Just needed one night. I forgot to tell you, sorry babe. I started locking our bedroom door at night. I didn't tell him. I started noticing other things. A smell, faint metallic, like rust and ammonia, drifting from under the locked door. Random items in the trash, burnt fabric, a broken phone, a shard of what looked like a license plate. Once, a heavily redacted document with the words consent form, barely visible. I asked again, what's in the room? He smiled. Still curious? Yeah, I live here too. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. I'm just trying to protect you from the mess. You'd hate it. I nodded, but I didn't believe him anymore. One afternoon, while he was out, I tried the door again. Still locked. I searched the apartment for a key. Checked drawers, coat pockets, the freezer. Nothing. I almost gave up. Then I remembered the envelope. The one labeled spontaneity. I opened it. No cash. Just a single key. My hands shook as I inserted it into the lock. It clicked. The room was dark. No windows. A single lamp in the corner, casting long shadows. The walls were lined with soundproofing foam, the kind you see in recording studios. The floor was bare concrete. There were no books. No junk. No storage boxes. Just a cot. A camera on a tripod. A whiteboard with names and dates. And a red backpack in the corner. I walked toward it, slowly, as if the room might react. I unzipped it. Inside were clothes. A wallet. An ID. The name didn't match anyone I knew. I heard the front door open. Tim calling my name. I froze. He stepped into the hallway. Saw the door ajar. His face changed. Not anger. Not fear. Something worse. Recognition. You weren't supposed to see that, he said quietly. I backed away. What is this? He didn't answer. Just stood there, watching me. I moved past him slowly, heart pounding. Grabbed my coat. My bag. My phone. He didn't stop me. Didn't follow. Just stood in the hallway, hands at his sides, expression unreadable. I left. I didn't go home. I didn't go to a friend's. I got in a cab and asked the driver to take me to a hotel. Any hotel. I sat in the lobby until sunrise, staring at my hands. I never went back. I blocked his number, deleted our photos, filed a report with as much detail as I could give without sounding unhinged. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't even know what the charge would be. Harboring strangers? Running a safe house? Or something worse? They said they'd look into it. I never heard from them again. Pam had a way of making silence feel full. She didn't fill space with noise or chatter. She filled it with presence, with the warmth of her gaze, with the way she'd tilt her head just slightly when listening, as if truly absorbing you, not just waiting to speak. When we first met, it was this quiet that caught me off guard. Not shyness, no. A composed stillness. A woman who had nothing to prove. We met at a friend's dinner party. One of those gatherings where everyone's a little too self-aware and the wine flows just fast enough to make eye contact easier. She was sitting alone on the balcony, legs crossed under her, cigarette curled between her fingers like punctuation. I asked if the seat was taken. She said, "Only by the last man who bored me." I laughed. She smiled. And that was it. We talked until the sky went dark. Nothing heavy. Nothing profound. But it all felt rare, like a conversation that hadn't been practiced before. When I asked if I could see her again, she said, "You already are." Our next few weeks were a blur of long walks, late-night takeout, and the kind of intimacy that builds not from shared trauma but shared quiet. I learned she liked her coffee black, her music slow, and her books dog-eared. She learned that I was terrible at folding laundry, that my father had died young, and that I still slept with a fan on for the noise. Pam moved in after 3 months. It felt fast, but right. She said her old apartment was a box full of ghosts. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to. Not then. She brought with her 2 suitcases, a box of records, and a small wooden jewelry box that she placed on my dresser and never opened. I asked about it once. She said, "Memories. Some of them don't like air." I nodded. It sounded poetic. She made everything sound like poetry. There were signs. Of course there were. She never talked about family. Said she'd outlived them emotionally. She had no social media. No old photos. No friends she introduced me to. When I asked about her past, she said, "People change. I don't like to carry the versions I've already buried." At the time, I admired it. Her ability to start clean. I told myself it was noble. Then one night, the doorbell rang. It was late. After midnight. We were curled on the couch, half asleep, a movie playing low in the background. The sound jolted us both. I looked at her. Her face had gone pale. "Do you want me to get it?" I asked. She shook her head. "Don't." But the bell rang again. I stood, walked to the door. She stayed frozen on the couch, like someone trying not to breathe. Through the peephole, I saw a man. Mid-40s. Tired eyes. Dressed in a jacket too thin for the weather. I opened the door a crack. "Can I help you?" He looked past me into the apartment. "I'm looking for Pam." He said her name like it meant something heavier. I stepped into the doorway, blocking his view. "Who are you?" He exhaled loudly. Frustrated. "I'm not here to make a scene. I just want to talk to her. She's not available. She lives here, right? I've been trying to find her for weeks." I didn't answer. He pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. Old, slightly crumpled. Pam, younger, hair shorter, next to a child. A boy maybe 4 or 5. Her arm around him, smiling. Not staged. Not posed. Real. I stared at it. "She's my sister-in-law," he said. "My brother's wife." I didn't remember walking back inside. Just the sound of the door shutting behind me. Pam was standing now, arms crossed, face unreadable. "Who was that?" she asked. I held the photo out like evidence. "Your brother-in-law, apparently." She didn't take it. Instead, she sat back down, slowly, like her body had grown heavier in the last 5 minutes. I thought he gave up. "What is this?" I asked. "Who is the boy?" She didn't answer. "Pam." She closed her eyes. "His name is Luca. Is he your son?" She nodded. "Where is he?" She looked at me then, finally. "Safe." That was all she said. Over the next few days, the story came out in pieces. Not chronologically. Not cleanly. Like scraps of paper drifting loose from a box she'd kept taped shut for years. Her ex-husband had been controlling. Possibly dangerous. The kind of man who used love as leverage. She'd left in the night. Taken Luca. Changed her name. Moved across the country. Lived quiet. Lived small. Until she met me. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to protect her. But things didn't add up. I found documents in her jewelry box. Old IDs. A passport with another name. Receipts from cities she'd never told me she'd lived in. A court document with the word custody, blacked out in thick marker. A cell phone she never used, hidden beneath her sweaters. I confronted her. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I liked who I was with you." That's not an answer. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just sat there, still and tired. I didn't want to be a woman with a past. I wanted to be a woman with a future. I started sleeping less. Checking the locks twice. Watching the street from the window, wondering if someone else would come knocking. If the man would return. If the boy was safe. If she was who she said she was. Or if she was just better at telling stories than I was at spotting lies. One night, I opened her phone. It wasn't password protected. There were messages. Some recent. Some older. Conversations with someone named M. The tone was familiar. Soft. Affectionate. She told him she missed him. That she was trying to figure things out. That he's not a threat. I didn't know if that meant me or someone else. I didn't ask. Instead, I told her to leave. Not cruelly. Not with anger. Just with exhaustion. She didn't protest. She packed quietly. Left the jewelry box. Took only what she came with. I watched her walk away without turning back. Weeks passed. I tried to forget. But forgetting isn't the same as healing. Linda kissed like she was memorizing something. Not in a hurried, hungry way. No, she kissed in layers, slow, deliberate, like her mouth was reading mine in Braille. She touched my back like she was decoding it. When she undressed, it felt like a secret being shared, not a performance. She was all soft confidence, half-laughed moans, and fingertips that knew when to linger and when to press. I fell quickly, but not all at once. It was like walking into a warm current. You don't notice how deep you've gone until your feet can't touch the bottom anymore. We met at a friend's trivia night. She answered a question about obscure 18th century poetry, and then made a joke about the sex lives of romantic poets that made me snort beer out my nose. She grinned, handed me a napkin, and said, "You're welcome." Our first date was a walk through the city at night. No agenda, just wandering. She stopped to look in shop windows and made up backstories for mannequins. She held my hand like it was something she'd been looking for. When I kissed her outside her building, she pulled me closer and said, "Good. You know how to wait." What followed was a kind of intimacy I hadn't known I'd been missing. We spent entire weekends in bed, not just tangled in sheets, but in conversation, in silence, in shared breathing. Her body felt like a language I was allowed to learn slowly. She liked eye contact. She liked tension. Once, she whispered that she liked when I touched her like I was trying to remember it. She made me playlists with titles like For Kissing in Kitchens and For After. She left notes in my books. She sent me photos, not explicit, but intimate. A bare shoulder, tousled hair, the curve of her hip under sunlight. They felt like invitations, not trophies. I told my friends I was happy. I told myself I was safe. But then things started to shift. Not in the obvious ways. Not in the ways that people warn you about. No sudden anger. No big betrayals. Just a slow drift. She'd laugh at things I didn't remember saying. "You always do that," she'd say. "Do what?" "Tilt your head when you're about to lie." I didn't think I did. Other times, she'd mention things I'd told her that I hadn't shared yet. "You said your ex used to hate when you didn't text back right away." I hadn't told her that. She'd smile. "Maybe I just know you better than you think." I chalked it up to intuition. Chemistry. The kind of connection that people write poems about. Then I found the group chat. It was late. She'd left her laptop open, gone to shower. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a recipe she'd bookmarked. The tab was labeled The Game. At first, I thought it was a quiz or a chat forum, but it wasn't. It was a shared document. A spreadsheet. Names. Dates. Notes. My name. Columns labeled First Impression, Attachment Style, Vulnerability Trigger, Most Common Insecurity, and SFW Score. My stomach dropped. I clicked through. There were entries for other people, too, men mostly. Women occasionally. All with similar categories. All detailed. Precise. Cold. Notes that didn't sound like jokes. They sounded like assessments. Some of it was about physical things. What made someone blush, what words worked best in bed, what gestures made them feel safe. Some of it was deeper. Acts brave when anxious. Needs praise after intimacy to stay open. Waits for affection. Doesn't ask. Reward when he initiates. Will disclose shame stories if you mirror softness. Be careful not to reassure too quickly. It short-circuits the vulnerability. I couldn't breathe. I scrolled up to see who had written what. The usernames were coded, but hers wasn't. L_. She had logged entries about me. About my childhood. About the night I told her something I'd never said out loud before. She'd written, he cried after. Held on like I was a lifeline. Said I made him feel seen. Note, this is the moment they imprint. I felt sick. She came back into the room, towel around her, humming. I closed the laptop. She kissed the top of my head and said, "You okay?" I nodded, throat tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, listening to her breathing, wondering who she was when I wasn't watching. The next day, I pretended nothing had happened. I needed time. I started looking deeper. Found more. Private group forums. A podcast episode she'd linked to, titled Emotional Engineering in Modern Dating. Comments under usernames I now suspected were people she knew, maybe even people she dated. One thread was titled, How to Extract a Confession Without Asking a Question. It read like a manual. I confronted her 2 nights later. We were in bed, the lights low. She was tracing circles on my chest, eyes half-lidded. I said her name. She looked up. I asked, "What's the game?" She didn't flinch. Didn't lie. Just blinked once and said, "You looked." I nodded. She sat up, pulled the sheet around her. "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" She sighed. "It started as a joke. A way to compare notes. Dating is messy. People lie. We wanted to understand patterns." "We?" She didn't answer. "You wrote about me." She nodded. "I wrote about everyone. You called me an imprint. It's just a term. It's not personal." I laughed. It sounded like a cough. "You wrote down my triggers like I was a project." She looked hurt. "I cared about you. You studied me. I paid attention. You used me." "No," she said fiercely. "I loved you." I didn't believe her. Not then. Maybe not ever. I left that night. Didn't pack. Didn't explain. Just walked out and didn't look back. She texted. Called. Left voicemails. Some angry. Some apologetic. One just said, "You were more than a game." I deleted them all. But some nights, I still hear her voice in my mind, soft, coaxing, full of affection. I remember the way she touched my face after I told her about my father. The way she kissed me when I said I was afraid of being invisible. The way she moaned my name like it meant something. And I wonder, was any of it real? Or was I just another entry in a spreadsheet? Another score in a game I never agreed to play? I changed my passwords. Deleted old messages. Took a break from dating. Started therapy. My therapist asked what I missed most. I said, feeling known. She said, "You were never known. You were observed." It took me weeks to understand the difference. It hurts even now. Zachy arrived in my life like mystery written in cursive. He wasn't the kind of man who made an entrance. He slipped into rooms like a thought. His voice was low, measured, almost melodic. When he laughed, it was restrained, as if he were afraid of letting go too much. But when he looked at me, really looked, there was weight in it. Like he saw things most people missed. Like he was memorizing me for something important. We met at a bookstore which felt like fate, or at least like good editing. He was hovering near the philosophy shelf, running his fingers across the spines, as if he were checking pulses. I was looking for something I wouldn't finish. He asked if I'd read any Kierkegaard, and I confessed I hadn't gotten past the first chapter of anything that didn't have a plot. He smiled, just one side of his mouth, and said, "Most people don't need a plot. They just need a reason." We left with coffee. Talked about books we hadn't read. Places we hadn't been. He didn't ask for my number. He wrote his on a napkin and said, "Only if you mean it." I meant it. Zachy felt like silk over stone. He was gentle, but there was something heavy underneath. He never interrupted. Never raised his voice. He listened like it was a form of worship. I told him things I didn't normally say out loud. About my fear of becoming invisible. About the gap between who I am and who I pretend to be. He didn't flinch. He said, "We're all pretending. The trick is doing it well enough to be loved anyway." He rarely talked about himself. Said he'd grown up all over. That he moved a lot. That his family was complicated. He worked in tech, or maybe logistics. It changed depending on the day. I didn't press. It felt rude to demand clarity from someone who gave me such quiet. He never introduced me to his friends. Said he didn't really have any here. Said people were temporary, and he preferred permanence. I thought I understood. I liked the way he made time feel slow. Like we were outside of it. He stayed over often, but never invited me to his place. Said it was small. Said it was nothing special. I imagined it as a monastic cell, all books and shadows. I romanticized the absence. One night, I asked what his name meant. He said it was Hebrew. Pure. Just. I repeated it, let it sit on my tongue. Zachy. It felt like a secret word. A key to something locked. I should have known. It started with a flicker. We were walking near the pier when a woman passed us, pushing a stroller. She didn't look directly at him, but stiffened as she passed. I noticed. He didn't. Or pretended not to. A week later, we were in a small cafe near my apartment. He got up to take a call. I watched him through the window, pacing, his body tense, his hand in his hair. He was speaking in a language I didn't recognize. Not Hebrew. Something harsher. When he came back, he smiled too easily. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Work stuff," he said. "Broken servers. Broken people." He kissed my forehead like punctuation. That night, I looked him up. It was impulsive. I'd never done it before, not with him. I told myself I respected his privacy, that I liked the mystery, but something in me needed to know. I searched Zaki. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no social media, no records. I tried his phone number. Got a dead end. I tried reverse image searching the one photo he'd let me take of him, smiling sideways, the ocean behind him. That's when I found it. A news article. 3 years old. A man with his face, slightly older, hair a bit shorter, but unmistakably him. Different name, Eli Rosen. Arrested in connection with a fraud case in another state. Charges later dropped. No conviction. No follow-up. I stared at the screen for hours. The next time I saw him, I didn't say anything. I watched him instead. The way he moved through my apartment. The way he always kept his phone face down. The way he never stayed past sunrise. I started asking small questions. Have you ever been to Chicago? Only once. Years ago. His profile had said he was from there. What's your middle name? I don't have one. The article said otherwise. I started digging. Quietly. Methodically. His license, which I'd seen once, had been from out of state. But I couldn't remember which. I checked my phone for photos. None. He'd always been careful. I started keeping notes. A list of inconsistencies. Stories that didn't match. Gaps he filled with poetry and silence. I found more articles. Mentions of an Eli Rosen connected to a startup that mysteriously shuttered. A woman quoted in a blog post calling him eloquent, elusive, and full of half-truths. Then I found the wedding photo, buried in a forum thread. A blurry image from 8 years ago. Same man. Different haircut. Arm around a woman with dark curls and a tired smile. Captioned, Eli and Miriam, 2014. I clicked through the thread. It was a support group for people affected by financial crimes. Scams. Lies. Someone had posted a warning. If you meet a man who says his name is Zaki, ask him what happened in 2019. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I printed the photo, folded it, put it in my wallet. I waited. He came over that Friday. I cooked, like always. He brought wine. We talked about nothing. I watched him chew, swallow, smile. Then I asked, "Who's Miriam?" He stopped, just for a second, then laughed. "Someone I used to know." "Used to be married to?" I asked. Silence. Then quietly, "Where did you see that? Does it matter?" He looked at me for a long time. No anger. Just calculation. Like he was deciding which mask to put on. "She's no one now," he said. "And before?" He stood, picked up his coat. "You shouldn't go looking for things you don't want to find." He didn't slam the door. He just left. I thought I'd never hear from him again. But 2 weeks later, a package arrived. No return address. Inside, a flash drive, a letter, and a photograph. The photo was of me, taken from outside my window. I was sitting at my desk, reading. The letter said, "You wanted the truth. Here's some of it. But remember, truth is a lens, not a mirror." The flash drive contained documents. Contracts, emails, photos, old IDs, different names, different lives, a map of aliases, a list of cities, some redacted, others circled, and one document that made my stomach twist, a birth certificate, a child, born in 2015, father listed as Eli Rosen. I never knew what was real. I never heard from him again. I moved soon after, changed my number, told my friends it had just ended, which was true in a way. The man I knew ceased to exist the moment I realized he'd never actually been there. Sometimes late at night, I still look out my window, half expecting to see him, standing across the street, watching. Not because I want him to be there, but because part of me still needs to know he was ever real. I keep the photo in a drawer. The one of me, taken from the sidewalk. I should burn it, shred it, but I don't. I used to think gaslighting was loud, dramatic, the stuff of movies and messy breakups, someone cornered in a kitchen shouting, "You're crazy," while the other person throws a wine glass against the wall. But the version I got smelled like lemon hand soap and wore soft sweaters. It made me tea when I was sad. It tucked me in gently at night. His name was Julian, and he had the kind of face that made you think of old novels, sharp in the right places, soft in others. His voice was deep, but not commanding. He He wasn't the kind of person who walked into a room and changed its temperature. He was the kind who made you feel like you'd been invited into something quieter, warmer, worth protecting. We met at a gallery opening in a converted warehouse where everything smelled like acrylic and ambition. I was there with friends, pretending to understand the art. He stood next to me in front of a piece that looked like someone had spilled wine and titled it Grief. He said, "I think the artist peaked in the third layer, and I laughed too hard in a room too quiet." He bought me a drink. We stood near the fire escape and talked about books and the feeling of waking up before the world does. He didn't touch me, just looked. And when I left, he asked for my number like it was a privilege, not a transaction. Our first date was slow. A bookstore crawl followed by hot chocolate, and a walk through a park dusted with late autumn leaves. He didn't try to kiss me, just held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember thinking, this feels like calm. Julian was gentle, thoughtful. He never raised his voice. He remembered small things, how I took my tea, the name of the stuffed animal I had as a child, the exact way I flinch when I hear sirens. He asked questions that made me feel interesting, even when I wasn't. When I told him about my anxiety, he nodded like it made perfect sense. "Of course you worry," he said. "You're always paying attention." I felt seen. But seeing and being seen are not always the same thing. It started small. He'd mix up details, tell a story about a date we never went on, mention a movie we'd never watched together. And when I corrected him, he'd smile and say, "Are you sure?" Not taunting, just curious. Like maybe I'd forgotten, like he was helping me remember. I'd laugh it off. I mean, memory's weird, right? Then it started happening more often. He'd reference conversations we never had. "Remember when you told me you hate flying?" I'd never said that. I love flying. I told him that once, in detail, how airports make me feel like I'm between versions of myself. "I think you're misremembering," he said once gently. "You told me that on our second date." I started to doubt myself. I began writing things down. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust me. Then came the apologies. "I'm sorry I was short with you earlier," he'd say, even though he hadn't been. Or maybe he had. I couldn't tell anymore. "You seemed upset," he'd add, and I'd respond, "I wasn't," and he'd look at me like I was lying. Not to him, to myself. It made me question my own tone, my own reactions. I'd find myself saying, "Was I rude just now? Or did I sound annoyed?" And he'd nod kindly. Not judgmental, just confirming what I'd already started to fear. I began to shrink. Not all at once. Quietly. I stopped bringing up things that felt off. Stopped correcting him. Stopped trusting the unease in my gut. I told myself I was just being sensitive. That Julian was better at remembering things than I was. That I had always been forgetful. But there was one moment that snapped something in me. We were at a dinner party, his friends, mostly. People with clean shoes and expensive glasses who nodded a lot when they spoke. I was telling a story about a childhood trip, something I'd told Julian before. Halfway through, he interrupted. No, he said, laughing. "That's not how it happened. You told me your brother was the one who..." He kept going. Retold the story with completely different details. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, but it felt like swallowing glass. Later, in the car, I asked him why he did that. He blinked. "Did what?" "Changed my story." He looked confused. "I didn't. That's how you told it to me." "No, it wasn't." "Well," he said, smiling gently, "maybe you just don't remember. That night, I didn't sleep. I pulled out my journal, flipped back to an entry from months ago. The story was written there, exactly as I'd told it. The version I knew. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I looked at my reflection in the dark window and whispered, "I'm not crazy." But it didn't feel true. The next morning, Julian brought me coffee in bed and kissed my forehead. "You seemed a little off last night," he said softly. "Everything okay?" I nodded. I didn't know how to explain that I felt like I was being erased, one small correction at a time. I started talking to friends again, ones I hadn't seen in a while because Julian and I were nesting. I told them small things, tested memories, asked if I used to talk differently, if I used to seem more certain. One of them said, "You used to be louder." Another said, "You second-guess yourself a lot now." It was like finding pieces of myself in other people's pockets. I began collecting them. I started pushing back. Not loudly, just enough. "That's not how I remember it," I'd say. Julian would frown, but only slightly. Eventually, he stopped correcting me. He started withdrawing instead, becoming less affectionate, more distant. He said I'd changed. that I'd become defensive. Paranoid. "You're always looking for something," he said once, "like you want to catch me doing something wrong." I wanted to say, no, I just want to catch myself still being real. But I didn't. Eventually I ended it. Not with a fight. Just a quiet, exhausted goodbye. He didn't protest. Didn't cry. He only said, "I hope you figure out what's going on with you." And that was the worst part. Because for weeks, I kept wondering, was he right? Had I imagined it all? Was I unstable, overly sensitive, too complicated to love? I went to therapy. I talked. I wrote. I tried to piece myself back together in the spaces he never reached. And one day, I found an old voicemail from before it all began, where I was laughing, loud and unfiltered, telling a story with no hesitation, no edits. I played it again, and again, and again, until I believed in her again. The version of me that didn't flinch at her own voice. The one who remembered things. The one who knew her story. I always thought falling in love would feel like a sunrise, a slow brightening, something warm filling the empty spaces you didn't realize were cold. But with Mira, it was twilight. She appeared like something conjured, not quite real, not quite imaginary. We met on a train. She sat across from me, one earbud in, eyes closed, humming under her breath. There was a smudge of ink on her thumb and a book in her lap I'd read twice. When the train stalled between stops, she opened her eyes and looked straight at me. "You have the face of someone who reads endings first," she said. I didn't know whether to laugh or lie. She smiled like she already knew. "Don't worry. So do I." We talked the rest of the ride. She got off 2 stops after me. I offered to walk her home. She said, "Let's not ruin it. Let's meet again by accident." We did. 3 days later, at a bookstore. She was in the poetry section, reading Neruda in Spanish, mouthing the words like they tasted better that way. She looked up, grinned, and said, "Told you." From there, it was a blur of late-night walks, rooftop wine, and stories told in whispers. Mira was the kind of person who made the world feel like a novel she was writing as she lived it. She spoke in metaphors, left poems on my pillow, and kissed like she was translating something from another language. Her apartment was filled with dried flowers, yellowing pages taped to the walls, and candles that smelled like old forests. She said she didn't believe in clocks. Time for her was feeling. She didn't have social media. No Instagram, no Twitter, not even a Facebook graveyard. "I like to be unfindable," she told me one night, curled against me under a blanket. "People don't know how to disappear anymore." I asked what she meant. She said, "Everything about us is archived, even the parts we outgrow." It was beautiful the way she said it, haunting, like she was already halfway gone. I told her I loved her after 6 weeks. She kissed me, slow and sad, like she was sorry. She didn't say it back. Not then. But she stayed. For a while. We had our rituals. Mornings were hers. She'd wake before me, make coffee with cinnamon, read at the kitchen table with her legs tucked up beneath her. At night, she liked to lie across my chest and tell me strange dreams she'd had as a child. Ones with staircases that never ended, and oceans made of mirrors, and keys that opened doors to nowhere. I started noticing gaps. Little things. A name she forgot she'd used before. A story she told twice, with different endings. A photo on my phone of her wearing a red dress she claimed she didn't own. Once, I found mail in her apartment addressed to someone named Lillian. She said it was the previous tenant. I wanted to believe her. Then she vanished. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd just come from the grocery store, arms full of things she liked, green grapes, almond milk, that weird Icelandic yogurt she said tasted like regret. Her door was unlocked. The apartment was empty. Not just empty. Erased. No clothes. No books. No candles. No flowers. No poems on the wall. Just bare walls. Clean counters. Silence. I called her. Straight to voicemail. I texted. Nothing. I waited. A day. 2. A week. I went to the building manager. He said the lease had ended. That she'd moved out. That she'd left no forwarding address. I went to the bookstore where we first re-met. Showed a picture. The clerk shook her head. "No one by that name works here." I didn't say she worked here. She shrugged. Never seen her. I tried every method. Googled her name, if that even was her name. Looked for old photos, tagged posts, anything. Nothing came up. It was like she'd never existed. But I knew she had. I had the memories. The scent of her still clung to my pillow. A scarf she left behind, soft and worn, smelling faintly of lavender and rain. I went through every message she'd sent. Read them like clues. One said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm borrowing this life." Another, "If I ever disappear, just pretend I was a story you read once." It started to get to me. I stopped sleeping, started walking through neighborhoods we'd visited, expecting to see her turning a corner, ducking into a bookstore, sitting at a cafe with a new name. I thought I saw her once, on a train. Same dark hair, same curve of the neck. I followed her off, my heart hammering. Tapped her shoulder. She turned. It wasn't her. The girl looked startled. I apologized. She nodded slowly and walked away, one earbud in, humming something under her breath. I started to wonder if I'd imagined the whole thing. But I had the scarf. The photo of her by the window, sunlight on her face. A note she'd written on the back of a receipt. "You make the world feel less sharp." I held on to that. Then 2 months later, I got a letter. No return address. No stamp. Just my name. My apartment. My street. Inside was a single page, torn from a notebook. It said, "I told you I like to be unfindable. Don't try. You'll only ruin the magic. Thank you for letting me be real, even for a little while." There was no signature, but I knew her handwriting. I never heard from her again. Sometimes, I wonder if Mira was ever meant to stay. If she was a person or a performance. If I was the only one who saw her, or just the next in a line of people she passed through like a ghost dressed in skin. Sometimes I still dream of her. In the dreams, she's always walking away. Not running. Just slowly disappearing into a crowd, or a fog, or the pages of a book I can't finish. I wake up with her name on my lips. And I don't say it out loud. Because part of me still believes that speaking it might summon her. And part of me knows that she's already gone. Lydia made everything feel like a secret worth keeping. We met in early spring, when the air still carried traces of winter, and the world was just starting to thaw. She was sitting alone at a bar, scribbling in a notebook and sipping something dark through a straw. I was supposed to meet a friend, but he bailed last minute, and I wasn't ready to go home. She looked like someone who belonged in noir films, eyes that lingered too long, lips that twitched when she was thinking. I asked if the seat was taken. She looked up and said, "It is now." From the beginning, she made it feel like we were co-conspirators. She'd lean in too close when she talked, laugh into my neck like she was hiding from the world. She had a way of touching my arm mid-sentence, like she was grounding herself, or maybe just reminding me that I was real. It wasn't just flirting, it was possession disguised as affection, and it worked. We fell into each other quickly. A week after meeting, I was waking up in her apartment more than my own. She slept like someone who trusted the world too much, always sprawled out with one leg tangled in the sheets, her hair covering half her face. In the mornings, she'd pull me back into bed under the pretense of warmth, then trace her fingers down my chest like a silent thank you. I'd rest my head against her, and we wouldn't speak for long stretches. It felt like we were building something wordless, something sacred. Her apartment was small but curated. Books stacked in uneven towers, candles burned halfway down, Polaroids of people I didn't recognize taped to the fridge. Sometimes she'd cook wearing nothing but one of my t-shirts and a playlist of old soul music. When we kissed, it was always slow, intentional, like she wanted to taste every syllable of a sentence I hadn't said yet. She told me early on that she'd been hurt before. That trust wasn't something she gave away, that she needed proof. So I gave it to her. I opened up. I shared things I hadn't told anyone. Childhood embarrassments, old regrets, the voice I sometimes heard in my head that told me to leave before I was left. She listened with a tenderness that felt like safety. She kissed me after I cried once. Said, "That's when I like you best, when you stop pretending to be fine." We started sending each other photos. Nothing extreme. Just quiet, private moments. Her in bed with the sheets half pulled down, legs crossed, smile sleepy. Me shirtless in the kitchen making coffee, her name written in steam on the mirror. It was playful, intimate, a language only we spoke. She asked for more. Voice notes. Screenshots of my texts with friends. She said she liked knowing exactly how I thought. What I said when she wasn't there. At first, it felt like closeness. Like transparency. I told myself it was modern love. Digital trust. Then one night, months into us, she asked for my passwords. I laughed. To what? Everything, she said. Instagram. Email. Your camera roll. She wasn't joking. I hesitated and her expression shifted. Not angry, just disappointed. I thought you said you had nothing to hide. I gave them to her. Of course I did. I told myself it was fine. That trust meant access. That if I had nothing to hide, there was no harm in letting her look. And for a while it was fine. Until it wasn't. It started small. A friend messaged me asking if I was okay. Said he'd seen something weird online. A comment thread under a music video. My name mentioned. A strange account posting vague things, quotes from our texts. Cropped images. A blurry photo of me asleep. I confronted Lydia. She blinked, innocent. Why would I do that? I wanted to believe her. So I did. But then someone from work pulled me aside one morning and asked if I'd meant to post a video to my story. I hadn't. My account was clean. But a burner account with my name, plus 2 numbers, was tagging people. Posting images. Snippets of voice notes. Out-of-context captions that made me sound unhinged. I changed all my passwords. Deleted old messages. Locked everything down. The next day she was cold. You don't trust me anymore, she said, staring into her coffee. I can't, I whispered. That night, she was gone when I got home. Her closet half empty. Her keys left on the counter. The damage didn't stop. Over the next few weeks, the burner accounts multiplied. Some were subtle, just reposted images, vague captions. Others were vicious. DMs to my friends. Screenshots of private conversations, edited to look worse than they were. Emails to my boss from fake accounts, suggesting I was unstable. That I'd said things I never said. It was a slow leak. A steady erosion of the life I'd built, one private piece at a time. I went to the police. They asked if I had proof. I showed them what I could, but nothing was concrete. The accounts came and went. IPs masked. Photos blurry. Voice notes distorted. It's hard to trace this, they said. Could be anyone. But I knew. I knew her rhythm. Her phrasing. The way she capitalized certain words. The way she always added a period after emojis. I changed my number. Deleted every account. Went offline. I thought it would stop. It didn't. She found new ways to reach me. A blank postcard in my mailbox. A playlist titled with an inside joke only we knew. A photo of my front door sent from an anonymous number. I moved. Started over. Tried to forget. But there are nights I still expect to see her silhouette in the hallway. Mornings I wake to phantom notifications. I flinch when someone touches my phone. I second-guess every message I send. I speak in half-truths now, not to lie but to protect. Lydia taught me that intimacy can be weaponized. That love, when twisted, becomes surveillance. That trust is not just a gift, it's a risk. And when it breaks, it doesn't shatter. It corrodes. Slowly. Quietly. Until you're not sure who you were before it happened. I met Eddie on a Wednesday, the kind of day that slips past unnoticed, all gray light and lukewarm coffee. We were both browsing the same table of used books at a charity shop. He picked up a battered copy of The Bell Jar and said, "Too heavy for a Wednesday?" I smiled, not because it was funny, but because he said it like he was trying to make me laugh, not impress me. There was a softness to him that felt rare, his voice low, his clothes slightly rumpled, his eyes always looking just past you, like he was afraid of staring too hard at anything. We started talking. About books mostly, then movies, then the neighborhood. We got coffee. He walked me home, didn't ask for my number, and then showed up 2 days later at the same bookshop, holding the bell jar again. "I figured you'd be here," he said. It should have felt creepy. It didn't. It felt like something out of a quiet little novel, the kind where nothing explodes and everything matters. Things moved slowly, then all at once. We started dating. Weekend coffees turned into weekday dinners. I spent the night at his place once, then again, then so often that my own apartment began to feel like a hotel I only visited to change clothes. He lived in a small, second-floor walk-up near the river. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, slanted ceilings, and a kitchen window that let in just enough morning light to make everything feel gentle. The apartment was old but well-kept. Mismatched furniture, stacks of records, tea tins lined up like soldiers on the kitchen shelf. It was the kind of place that looked like someone had loved it for a long time. He told me he lived alone. I didn't question it. The first time I noticed something strange, we'd just finished dinner, and he was doing the washing up while I dried. I went to put a dish towel away and opened the wrong cabinet, expecting cereal boxes or mismatched mugs, and found instead a stack of Tupperware labeled in someone else's handwriting. Neat, slanted, unmistakably feminine. I paused. He didn't look over. Just kept scrubbing. I didn't say anything. Later, I asked him casually if he'd lived there long. He said 4 years. Before that, he'd lived with a roommate who moved away. This place just felt easier, he said. Fewer people. Less talking. I nodded. I understood. I liked the quiet too. But things kept accumulating. Small things that didn't fit. A pair of black ballet flats tucked under the coat rack. A hairbrush in the bathroom with long strands of dark hair that weren't mine. A cup on the counter with lipstick around the rim. Not the shade I wore. I asked him once, lightly, about the shoes. He said they were old. From a friend who used to crash there sometimes. I just never got around to throwing them out. He said it easily, casually, like it wasn't worth thinking about. And maybe it wasn't. People are messy. They forget. They hold on to things longer than they should. But the unease lingered. There was a door in the hallway, just past the bathroom. Painted the same off-white as the walls, easy to miss. It was always shut. I assumed it was a closet. Once I tried to open it, just to see. It was locked. I teased him about it. What's in there? Skeletons? He smiled and said, just stuff I don't want to deal with. The joke landed, but something about his tone didn't. It was too careful. Like he meant every word. One night, I woke up to the sound of movement. It was soft, barely there, a creak of floorboards, a faint rustling, like someone walking barefoot across a carpeted room. I sat up. Eddie was asleep beside me, breathing evenly, one arm draped across his chest. The sound stopped. I listened for a long time. Nothing. Eventually, I lay back down and told myself it was the building. Old houses make noise. Pipes would wind. But it happened again. Not every night. Just enough to notice. Just enough to wait for it. One evening, Eddie left to grab groceries. I was alone in the apartment, reading on the couch. The hallway was dim, painted in shadows. I looked at the closed door again. The knob slightly scuffed, like it had been turned too many times by nervous fingers. I stood up, walked toward it, tried the handle. Still locked. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. Just silence. A thick, heavy kind. I stepped back, took a photo of the door with my phone. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself later that it was real. When Eddie came home, I asked him, this time more directly, what was behind it. He hesitated, then shrugged. Storage. My sister's stuff. Your sister? He nodded. She used to live here. Moved out a while ago. I kept some of her things. She didn't want them. It didn't make sense. There were too many signs. Too many traces of someone who wasn't gone. I started watching more closely. The routines. The spaces. The silences. Eddie would disappear for stretches. 10 minutes, sometimes 20, saying he needed to check something or shower or fix a light. Once, I walked into the kitchen and saw the hallway door slightly ajar. Just an inch. Enough to catch a glimpse of movement inside. A figure seated. A hand rising to brush hair from a face. Then the door closed. I stood there frozen, my heart knocking loudly in my chest. That night, I didn't ask him anything. I just watched him sleep. His face peaceful, almost childlike, illuminated by the glow of the street lamp outside. In the morning, I left early. Said I had work. Didn't kiss him goodbye. The next day, I came back with a plan. I waited until he was out. I told him I had a meeting. He said, come by after. I said I would. I used the spare key he'd given me. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. I walked through slowly, checking each room as though I hadn't seen them 100 times before. I went to the hallway. Stood in front of the door. Tried the knob. Unlocked. I opened it. The room was small. Dimly lit. A single narrow window, near the ceiling, let in a sliver of light. There was a bed neatly made. A small bookshelf. A desk. A closet. And in the far corner, seated in an armchair, a woman. She didn't look up. Her hair was tied back messily. She wore a gray sweater and jeans. Her feet were bare. I stepped inside without thinking. My voice caught in my throat. Hello. She raised her head slowly. Her eyes were sharp. Clear. Not surprised. You're not supposed to be in here, she said. I didn't know anyone lived. Of course you didn't. She stood. Her presence filled the room in a way that made it feel smaller. Are you his new girlfriend? I nodded. She sighed. He always brings them here. I blinked. What do you mean? She didn't answer. Just walked past me. Out of the room. Down the hall. Into the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water, like she did it every day. Sat at the table. Waited. Eddie came home 20 minutes later. He froze when he saw her. Then he saw me. And everything fell apart. There was shouting. Questions. Explanations that didn't explain anything. She was his sister. She had nowhere else to go. She was fragile. She didn't like people. She asked for privacy. He was trying to protect her. He didn't know how to tell me. I asked why she never left the apartment. He said she didn't feel safe outside. I asked why he never told me the truth. He didn't answer. I left that night. Not dramatically. Not with tears or ultimatums. Just quietly. I packed my things. Took my toothbrush. My book. The sweater I'd left on his chair. He called. Texted. Emailed. I didn't respond. Weeks passed. Then months. It was the kind of party where the ice melts before the guests arrive, and no one wants to sit on the white couch because it's too white, too deliberate. There were fairy lights strung up like a Pinterest board had exploded across the ceiling, and someone had lit candles in the bathroom, which felt vaguely manipulative. It was Helen's party, Helen's friends, Helen's playlist, Helen's curated wine selection based on astrological compatibility. I was the boyfriend, the plus one with a title, the man allowed to refill the guacamole bowl, but not trusted to rearrange the cheese board. Helen greeted me with a wink when I walked in, an actual wink, like we were co-conspirators in a sitcom. She handed me a drink already sweating down the stem, and disappeared before I had a chance to say anything real. That was how it went. I'd catch glimpses of her between social obligations, like a rare bird flitting through a forest of male admirers who all seemed to have inside jokes with her. The first one I met was Damien. Tall, apologetically handsome, the kind of guy who probably had a signature cocktail and a skincare routine he didn't talk about. He hugged her, too long, too full-bodied, and said, "You still smell like cinnamon," which made me blink. Helen laughed and said, "You always say that." She didn't introduce me. I introduced myself, and Damien gave me the kind of handshake used for congratulations or condolences. Then there was Milo. He brought her a single sunflower wrapped in newsprint. She kissed his cheek twice, once on each side, and said, "My radiant boy." I stood behind her, holding 2 glasses of wine like a waiter who'd forgotten the tray. She didn't flinch, didn't say my name, just kept talking to Milo about a poem he'd written that made her cry in the best way. I walked through the party like a ghost with a smile. People assumed I was someone's friend. I poured drinks and made small talk with people who never asked how I knew Helen. She floated between conversations, touching arms, laughing too loudly, making everyone feel like the center of her solar system. Every time our eyes met across the room, she smiled like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, on the edge of things, watching. I finally pulled her aside in the kitchen, near the sink where the wine glasses were multiplying like rabbits. I asked her, quietly, who all these guys were. She laughed. "Oh my God, you're not jealous, are you?" she said, in a voice that was both amused and slightly condescending. "They're just friends. We've all known each other for years. You're the boyfriend. You're the one who matters." But I didn't feel like I mattered. I felt like a character who'd wandered into the wrong scene. Like a prop placed too far stage left. After that, I started watching more closely. There were patterns. Milo brought gifts. Damien refilled her drink before she asked. Another guy, Jonas, massaged her shoulders in the middle of a story, and she leaned into it like it was normal. A fourth guy took her hand and kissed her fingers. I watched her face, not flinching, not surprised. Just pleased. Later that night, I overheard someone ask her if she was still single. She laughed and said, Sort of. Sort of. I walked home alone that night. She said she needed to stay and clean up. She said it like a favor, like I should be grateful to be excused. The next day, she texted me 12 times. Memes, jokes, a song she said reminded her of me. She asked if I was mad. I said no. I didn't want to be that guy. The possessive one. The insecure one. I told myself she was just affectionate. Just social. Just complicated. But it kept happening. Every gathering, every dinner, every casual hangout turned into a pageant. A parade of men who all believed they had a special place in her life. And maybe they did. Maybe I was just one more. I started testing her. Asking questions. Have you ever dated Damien? What's the deal with Milo? How do you know Jonas? She always had an answer. We hooked up once years ago. He had a crush on me in college, but I never went there. He's like a brother. Always just enough truth to sound plausible. Always just enough charm to make me feel like the one who was overreacting. But I stopped sleeping well. I started checking her phone when she was in the shower. I hate that I did it. I hate that I turned into someone I didn't recognize. But I found messages. Not explicit. Not incriminating. Just soft. Flirty. Familiar. Like she was playing 20 games of emotional chess at once, and I was the only one who thought we were playing checkers. I confronted her. She cried. Accused me of not trusting her. Said I was projecting. Said I was trying to control her friendships. Said I was the reason she never introduced me, because I made things weird. I left. Not that night, but soon after. The last time I saw her, she was laughing at something Jonas said, her hand on his knee, her body turned completely away from me. I realized then that she didn't want a boyfriend. She wanted an audience. She wanted to be adored by a rotating cast of men who all thought they were the exception. Maybe she didn't even know she was doing it. Or maybe she did, and that made it worse. In the end, I wasn't angry. Not really. Just tired. The first thing I noticed about Parker was the way he showed up. Fully, instantly, without hesitation. He didn't drift into my life. He arrived like a favorite song you forgot you loved. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those long tables where conversation overlaps and half the guests are strangers. He slid into the seat next to me during dessert and made a joke about the candles being a fire hazard. I laughed with my mouth full of cake. He didn't ask for my number. He asked what kind of stories I liked. He said people's tastes and stories revealed more than their dating profiles ever could. I told him I liked stories that didn't end neatly. That felt honest. He said that sounded like a challenge. He texted later that night, I have a better cake place. Want to test your theory about messy endings? Our first date was 2 days later. Our second was the next night. By the end of the week, we were finishing each other's sentences and sharing playlists. He wasn't flashy. He didn't dress like someone trying to impress, but everything he said felt like it had been quietly, carefully chosen. He listened in a way that made you feel like the only person in the room. He remembered things I didn't even realize I'd said. My favorite childhood movie, the exact way I take my coffee, the name of the dog I had in second grade. He wasn't too charming. That's what made it work. He was just the right amount of open, the right amount of funny, the right amount of vulnerable. He talked about his family in vague but affectionate tones. Said he'd moved around a lot. Said he liked that I asked questions that didn't have easy answers. We talked about books, about loneliness, about the weird little rituals that make us feel human. He told me he hated being called mysterious. Said it was just a word people used for someone who didn't explain themselves fast enough. I believed him. Because what else do you do when someone looks at you like they already know how the story ends? For 6 weeks, we were inseparable. Not in a clingy way. In a natural, effortless way. He stayed over more nights than not. He cooked breakfast like a person who meant it. He left notes tucked into my shoes and brought me random things from used bookstores, dog-eared paperbacks, postcards, a bookmark shaped like a raven. He made me feel curated, like I'd been found. And then, just as easily as he arrived, he vanished. No fight, no slow fade, just gone. It started with a missed call, then a text left on read, then nothing. I waited, told myself he was busy, that something had come up, that he'd lost his phone or dropped it in a river or been abducted by aliens. But days passed, then a week, then 2. I messaged him again, just one line. Are you okay? No reply. I started retracing everything, scrolling through our messages, replaying our conversations, wondering what I'd missed. Had I said something wrong? Had I asked too much? Had I not asked enough? Then the dreams began. I'd wake in the middle of the night, certain I'd heard him say my name. I'd turn and expect to see him standing in the corner of my room, barefoot, holding one of those strange bookmarks. I started hearing things, phantom notifications, footsteps in the hallway, the creak of the floorboard by the kitchen, the one he always stepped on. I told myself it was just grief, or confusion, or some twisted combination of both. Then I got a message. Not from him. From a number I didn't recognize. No name. Just a line of text. Do you still think stories shouldn't end neatly? I stared at the screen so long my eyes burned. I replied, Parker? No response. I didn't sleep that night. A few days later, I saw someone who looked like him across the street near the train station. Same walk. Same jacket. Same slightly tilted head posture. I called out. He didn't turn. I ran across traffic to follow, but by the time I reached the other side, he was gone. No trace. Like he'd dissolved into the crowd. Then the messages started coming more frequently. Always vague. Always from different numbers. Did you finish the book I gave you? Still drinking your coffee black? Did the raven fly away yet? I changed my number. Deleted my social media. Told friends I needed a break. But the messages kept coming. Sometimes they were just emojis. Sometimes they were quotes from our conversations. Sometimes it was just my name. I went to the police. They asked if I was being threatened. I said no, not exactly. I showed them the messages. They said it was probably someone playing a prank. Someone with access to old messages. Maybe an ex. Maybe a friend. They shrugged. Told me to block the numbers and stay alert. I did. I blocked every number. But new ones kept appearing. I started asking questions. Quietly. Carefully. I reached out to the mutual friend who'd hosted that first dinner. Asked what she knew about Parker. She looked confused. Said she didn't remember anyone named Parker from that night. Said the guest list was small. Said maybe I was thinking of someone else. I showed her a photo. Us at the bookstore. Him holding a copy of a poetry collection, he said reminded him of me. She stared at it. Said she'd never seen him before. I felt the air leave the room. I tried searching online. His name. His number. His photo. Nothing. No social media. No digital footprint. No trace of the apartment I'd visited half a dozen times. When I went back to the address he'd given me, someone else answered the door. A woman in a paint-stained hoodie. She looked annoyed. Said she'd lived there for 2 years. Said no one named Parker had ever lived there. Said I had the wrong place. I started to doubt myself. I'd kept mementos. The notes. The books. The bookmarks. The photos. But even those began to feel wrong. The handwriting looked unfamiliar. The photos grainy, faces slightly out of focus. Like they'd been altered. Or like I'd imagined them entirely. I asked another friend to look at a photo of us. She squinted. Said, "That's you, right? But who's the guy?" I stared at her. She frowned. "Is this one of those AI boyfriend memes?" I stopped showing people after that. I started sleeping with the lights on. Started checking the locks twice. Then 3 times. I changed my number again. Got a security camera. Deleted all the photos. Burned the notes and the bookmarks in a metal bowl on my balcony. I met Mary on a Monday. We matched on the app Tinder. I messaged her to begin with. "If you had to fake your own death, how would you do it?" She replied 5 minutes later, disappearing into a monastery. Everyone forgets monks exist. I laughed out loud. We talked for hours after that. About books, old movies, obscure conspiracy theories. She had this way of answering questions like she'd already considered them long before I asked. She asked about my childhood dreams. If I believed in reincarnation. What I thought happened when we die. I told her I didn't know. She said, "That's a better answer than pretending you do." We met in person 3 days later. She was quieter in real life, but not shy. Just precise. She didn't waste words. I liked that. She wore a long coat and a scarf even though it was warm, and her eyes scanned everything like she was collecting data. But when she looked at me, it was direct. No flinching. No performance. We went to a museum. She led me through the abstract exhibits like she had a map in her head. She made intelligent, strange observations. She said one painting looked like a lie told by a lonely man. Another reminded her of a dream she used to have as a child, falling down a well with her hands replaced by mirrors. I was hooked. We started seeing each other regularly. Her apartment was always immaculate, like a showroom, but with personal touches, dried flowers, handwritten notes, books stacked like altars. She never let me stay the night, always saying she needed her sleep sanctuary. I didn't push it. I liked the mystery. It felt intentional. But even early on, things didn't always add up. She never gave me her last name. Said it was too Googleable. She never let me take pictures of her. Not even candid ones. She didn't have Instagram. Her phone was always on silent. When I called her once out of the blue, it went straight to voicemail. She texted a minute later. "Sorry, I screen everything." She told me she was a freelance editor. I believed her. She talked about manuscripts and deadlines and clients who couldn't spell. But I never saw her working. Never once saw her open a laptop. Still, I ignored the inconsistencies. I told myself she was just private, that it was refreshing, that I was lucky to be the one she chose to let in. Until one night, 6 weeks in, her profile reappeared. I wasn't looking. A friend of mine, Rachel, matched with her. She sent me a screenshot. "Isn't this the girl you're dating? Same photos. Same face." but a different name, Elise. And a different bio, witchy. Word nerd. I make killer tea. I stared at the screen for a long time, then messaged Mary. I didn't accuse. I asked. Hey, I typed. Weird thing, I think I saw your profile pop up again, but under another name? She took 2 hours to respond. Oh, that's old. I forgot to delete some versions. I was experimenting with tone. I wanted to believe her. I did. People use different apps. Try out different bios. But something in the way she phrased it, versions, made my stomach twist. That night, I made a burner account. Swiped through. Found her again. Different name this time, Lila. Same photos. Slightly altered captions. I kept swiping. I found a fourth. A fifth. Each one had a variation of her. Same face, different names. Different bios. Different ages. In one, she was 26 and worked in publishing. In another, she was 32 and a traveling esoteric healer. In another, she was a philosophy grad student. I confronted her. This time directly. She didn't deny it. She said she was testing identities. That she was interested in authenticity and how people construct themselves online. That I was the only one who got close. I asked her if any of the stories she told me were true. She said, "Does it matter if you felt they were?" Something broke in me then. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a glass cracking under pressure. I started digging. I reverse searched her photos. Nothing. No LinkedIn, no Facebook, no school records. I checked a shared photo we'd taken. Just our hands holding coffee cups. I ran it through a geotagger. It had been taken 3 miles from the location she said she lived. I checked the building she claimed was home. It was an office complex. I texted her again. "Who are you really?" She replied, "I'm a story you wanted to believe." I stopped hearing from her after that. But a week later, someone messaged me on Reddit. A stranger. Said they'd seen me in a comment thread. That I looked familiar. That they'd dated someone who looked exactly like Mary. But she'd gone by the name Claire. He said she vanished after 2 months. No trace. And he'd thought maybe he imagined her, until he saw my comment. Then another person messaged me. A woman this time. Same story. Same face. Different name. Different city. We started a group chat. There were 6 of us before the week was out. Each had met her under a different identity. Each had been ghosted or left with confused memories, fuzzy timelines, and unanswered questions. One guy said she'd borrowed money. Another said she'd moved in for a week and then disappeared with a pair of his shoes and a flash drive. One woman said she'd found a small note left behind in her bathroom cabinet. "Thank you for the version of me you believed in." We tried to trace her. Compared details. Addresses. Phone numbers. All dead ends. Every trail led to another version. Another alias. Another constructed life. Eventually, the group chat died out. People moved on. Deleted their accounts. Tried to forget. But I couldn't. I kept thinking about her. About Mary. Or Lila. Or Claire. About the way she looked at me like she already knew the ending. About the way she never flinched when caught. About the quiet confidence of someone who's been caught before and survived it. I still have the bookmarks she gave me. The ones shaped like ravens. I don't know why I kept them. Maybe to remind myself it was real. That she was real. That I wasn't just talking to a ghost in a skin she borrowed. Sometimes I check the apps. Swipe through. Just in case. And once in a while I see her. A new name. A new city. A new fictional job. But always the same eyes. I don't match anymore. I don't message her. I just look. And I wonder what story she's telling now. And who's believing it. I met Brenda by accident, which is how I seem to meet most people who matter. I hadn't planned to go out that night. It was one of those after-work happy hours with co-workers I barely knew and didn't want to know better. The bar was too loud, and the drinks were overpriced, and I kept checking my phone like I was waiting to be rescued. Then someone knocked over a glass of something red and sticky, and it splashed across my arm, and when I turned, there she was, Brenda, holding a napkin out like it was a peace offering. She laughed when I cursed under my breath, and I remember thinking her laugh didn't match the place. It didn't rise above the noise. It cut through it. She looked like someone who didn't have to try very hard to be noticed. Not in the polished, curated way most people do, but in that casual, quiet way that makes you forget what you were talking about. We started seeing each other quickly. There wasn't a big spark or a slow build, just a kind of quiet compatibility that felt like it could grow into something. She was funny in a dry, absent-minded way. She liked trivia, hated small talk, and never made anything feel like a performance. She'd show up at my apartment with snacks and just stay. At first, for a night or two. Then a weekend. Then full weeks where I'd come home from work and she'd be there, barefoot, cooking pasta or scrolling through her phone on the couch like she'd always lived there. I didn't mind. I liked having her around. I worked long hours, didn't have much of a social life, and she never demanded much. She never made a fuss if I was late or tired or distracted. She'd drift in and out of conversation like a cat moving through a room, quiet and warm and hard to pin down. There were small things I noticed, but nothing that rang a full bell. She sometimes forgot her wallet when we went out. Not every time, but enough that I started paying without thinking. She'd say it was in her other bag or that she'd left it in the car. It didn't seem like a pattern at first, just life. Then one weekend I let her borrow my car. She said she wanted to grab a few things before coming back over, and I didn't think twice about it. When she returned, everything seemed normal. She tossed the keys on the counter, kissed my cheek, and asked what I wanted for dinner. Later that evening, I opened the glove compartment to grab some receipts I'd been meaning to file. It was open already. Not wide, just cracked. Papers were shifted. My bank statements, some unopened mail, old bills. I stared at it for a full minute, trying to remember if I'd left it like that. I hadn't. I told myself not to be paranoid. But the next week, I got a fraud alert from my bank. A charge I didn't recognize. Over $400 at some boutique store I'd never heard of. I reported it, canceled the card, and chalked it up to online fraud. These things happen. That's what the bank said. These things happen. Then it happened again. And again. Weird charges. Subscription services I didn't sign up for. Food delivery orders to addresses that weren't mine. Makeup brands I'd never heard of. I canceled another card. Then a third one. I started checking my accounts daily, refreshing the apps obsessively. I created a spreadsheet to track purchases. I stopped sleeping well. And still it didn't click. Not until the watch. I got a call from my bank's fraud department. They asked if I'd recently purchased a luxury watch, $5,000, already shipped. I laughed, confused, and said no. They read the delivery address aloud. It was mine, not my billing address. My actual apartment. That's when the floor dropped out. I tore through my finances. Line by line. I found dozens of charges I hadn't seen before. Not just on one card. On all of them. 2 credit. 1 debit. Every account I'd ever linked to my autofill browser settings. Every saved password. Every stored login. I confronted her that night. She was on the couch, watching a cooking show and eating chips with her feet on my coffee table. I stood there, holding a printout of my bank statements, my voice shaking. She didn't flinch. Didn't cry. Didn't deny it. She said, I was going to pay it all back. Like that made it okay. She said she only took what she thought I wouldn't miss. That I seemed comfortable. That I looked like the kind of guy who wouldn't notice a few thousand missing. She said she was in a tight spot and figured I'd understand. That was her word, understand. I told her to leave. She didn't argue. Just packed a tote bag, grabbed her phone charger, and left like it was a regular Tuesday night. I reported her the next day. Called the police. Filed a fraud report. They were polite but uninterested. Since she'd lived with me, at least unofficially, it was complicated. A civil matter, they called it. No forced entry. No physical threats. No clear proof she'd taken the cards directly. Just access. Just opportunity. My bank helped reverse some of the charges. Not all. I was still left with thousands of dollars in debt. The watch. The boutique makeup. The subscription scams. It didn't matter that I hadn't touched any of it. I changed my locks. Froze my credit. Bought a paper shredder. I started storing my wallet in a locked drawer. I stopped auto-saving passwords. I deleted apps. I barely slept. A month later, I got a message on Facebook from a guy. He said he'd dated someone named Brenda. She stayed with him for a bit. Then his account started acting weird. His bank card was declined at a gas station 3 towns over while he was still at work. He'd found my name in her browser history and thought I might know something. He asked, "What did you do about it?" I didn't know how to answer him. Because the truth is, I didn't do much. By the time I realized what she'd taken, she was already gone. And maybe that's the worst part. Not the stolen money. Not the debt. But the fact that someone can crawl so quietly into your life, make you laugh, make you feel like maybe, finally, you've found someone who doesn't ask for too much. And then, without warning, they hollow you out from the inside and leave nothing but receipts. You know that stage where you're not really looking, but you're also not totally closed off? That's where I was when I met him. James, a friend of a friend. He had this soft, tired voice like he used to yell a lot as a kid and gave up somewhere around 25. We met at a late brunch where the eggs were cold and the mimosas too warm, but he made it bearable by leaning in during the awkward parts of conversation and whispering commentary that made me snort into my glass. That was our beginning, jokes whispered behind the backs of mediocre people. He worked at a laptop repair place in a strip mall and had a side hustle selling sneakers, which sounded sketchy until he explained it was mostly vintage Jordans and the occasional rare drop he got lucky with. His clothes were simple, faded hoodies, scuffed sneakers, a jacket with the zipper mostly broken, and I liked that. It made me feel lighter, being around someone who didn't perform ambition like a stage show. We started slow, texting boba dates, walking downtown with nowhere to go. When he first stayed over, he folded his clothes neatly on a chair and didn't complain about my lumpy couch. I remember thinking, wow, this is easy. No games, no flashing red lights. Just someone who listened. Really listened. He remembered the weird name of my high school. He sent memes about a show I mentioned once in passing. He never tried too hard, which, in a world where everyone's either charming or exhausting, felt like a miracle. Somewhere around week 4, he started asking questions about fashion. Harmless at first. Do people still wear those chunky designer shoes? What's the deal with those bags that look like lunch boxes? I laughed. I thought he was just trying to understand a world he didn't belong to. Because he didn't. Not really. My closet was a graveyard of birthday gifts and retail therapy. My parents had money, not rich, but enough to make growing up feel padded. I told him the truth. I liked nice things, but I wasn't obsessed. I didn't even use half of what I had. That was probably my first mistake. The second was not noticing when things started to go missing. It began with a bag, a black leather Saint Lang that I'd shoved to the back of my closet and forgotten. When I couldn't find it, I assumed I left it at my parents' or maybe lent it to a friend and forgot. A week later, another bag disappeared. Tan. Barely used. That one I remembered clearly. I'd worn it to a wedding and scuffed the bottom on a sidewalk grate. I started feeling stupid. Sloppy. Like I didn't know how to keep track of my own things. Then James started showing up in new clothes. Not flashy. Just updated. A Burberry jacket. Sneakers that still had the stock lacing. A watch that caught the light too often. When I asked about it, he laughed and said his sneaker hustle had leveled up. He was flipping vintage clothes now. Designer stuff moves fast if you know the right people, he said, like he was proud of himself for cracking the code. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But something itched at the back of my mind like a warning label I kept peeling off and re-sticking. One night, he asked me to look something up on his phone while he was in the shower. I unlocked it and a notification slid down as I swiped up. Offer received, $1,200. The app name was unfamiliar, but the image wasn't. It was my bag. The tan one. Taken in my bedroom. My mirror. My rug. I didn't breathe. My hands moved faster than my brain. I scrolled. Another listing. My sunglasses. Then a pair of heels I hadn't worn since last Christmas. My closet, piece by piece. My things, my background, my life, cataloged and sold. I didn't confront him right away. I waited until he left, then tore through my apartment like a detective with a deadline. I hadn't even realized how much was gone. A necklace from my aunt. A silk scarf I'd only worn once. Half my good makeup. Some of it I'd chalked up to forgetfulness. The rest I hadn't even noticed. It wasn't a robbery. It was a slow siphoning. Like a leak you don't see until the ceiling caves. The next morning, I asked him about it. Calm. Almost curious. He didn't deny it. He said he borrowed a few things because he was in a rough patch and knew I wouldn't miss them. He said it like I should be flattered. Like I was generous for being robbed. Then he said something I'll never forget. Most girls would have dumped me already just for not having money. At least I'm trying. You should be proud of me for leveling the playing field. Leveling the playing field. Like my closet was a bank vault, and he was making a withdrawal on emotional equity. I told him to leave. He didn't argue. Just packed a bag, asked if I wanted the profits back, and walked out like we were splitting a check after brunch. I changed the locks that night. Not because I thought he'd come back, but because I couldn't stand the idea that he might. Then came the messages. At first, they were from resale buyers. Women asking for receipts, authenticity cards, original packaging. I hadn't sold anything, but James had used my name on the accounts. My email. My photos. He didn't just sell my things, he sold them as me. Some of the buyers were angry. Some were confused. A few threatened to report me. I tried to explain but realized quickly that there was no point. He'd already deleted the profiles. Wiped everything clean. And since he hadn't broken in or forced his way in, the police called it a civil matter. Months passed. I got some of the charges reversed. Not all. Thousands of dollars slipped through my fingers. The rest I paid off slowly, one fraud alert at a time. I started locking everything valuable in a storage unit. I don't even visit it anymore. The joy of owning something beautiful is gone. Now it all just feels like evidence. I haven't dated seriously since James. Not because I'm scared. Not because I'm bitter. But because he taught me something I didn't want to learn. That someone can watch you closely, learn your rhythms, your blind spots, and take from you like they're entitled to the pieces. It's not the drama you expect. It's quiet, steady, like a hand in your pocket while you're sleeping. A few weeks ago, I got a message from a girl I didn't know. She said she was dating a guy named James who worked at a repair shop. She found my name in his browser history. She wanted to know one thing. Did you ever notice anything missing? I didn't answer right away. What could I say that wouldn't sound like bitterness dressed up in warning? Eventually, I just replied, "Start checking your closet." And then I blocked her. Because some lessons I've learned don't come with refunds. Some people collect pressed flowers. Some people write poems in the margins of library books. Some people carve tiny hearts into tree bark and hope no one notices. Mark made jewelry. Strange, beautiful, slightly crooked jewelry. I met him at a backyard party I didn't want to be at, wearing an old hoodie and carrying the vague scent of expired IPA. He walked up like he'd been waiting for me, like I was a bus arriving 3 minutes late. He asked me about a book I'd tweeted about 3 years ago, obscure, academic, and long out of print. I should have been weirded out. I wasn't. I was flattered. That's how these things start, right? With a compliment and a weird fact and a voice that sounds like it's been practicing silence. He was intense. Too intense. Not in the I love you after 2 dates way, but in the stares too long without blinking way. He listened like he was memorizing me. Took in my words like data points. Asked questions like he was building a file. But everyone loved him. They said he was deep. Quiet. Thoughtful. An old soul. Someone called him, which is what people say when they don't know if you're wise or just uncomfortable. I told myself to stop judging. So what if he was a little odd? He was kind. Never pushy. Always asked if I was okay. He brought me weird snacks from niche grocery stores and made mixtapes with titles like, "For When You Feel Like a Ghost But Want to Dance." And then came the bracelet, made of resin and dried flowers. Delicate, like a secret you only whisper once. He said he made it for me after our 3rd date. I wore it, not because I liked it, but because it was easier to say thank you than explain the weird feeling in my chest. Then came the ring. A chunk of something amber-colored with a stone that looked like it had a heartbeat. He said it matched my emotional temperature. Said it pulsed when I was sad. I laughed. He didn't. I should have seen the signs. The questions got more specific. What shampoo did I use? What kind of toothpaste? Did I wear socks to bed? Did I sleep curled on my side or flat on my back like a corpse? He said he liked knowing people completely. He said it like a prayer. I told myself he was just curious. I told myself a lot of things. Then came the necklace. It was a pendant hanging from a black cord. A clear resin drop with something swirling inside. Dark red, like a dried rose petal, or maybe a splatter from a painting that wanted to be a wound. I touched it, confused. "Is this a flower?" I asked. Or? He looked proud, like a kid showing off a macaroni craft. "It's you," he said. "Me. Your blood," he said. "From your period. I took it from your menstrual cup that one time. Cleaned it. Preserved it. Now I can carry you everywhere." He said it like it was romantic, like he'd written me a sonnet in viscera. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because my brain didn't know what else to do. I thought it was a joke. A twisted, deeply uncomfortable joke. He wasn't joking. He looked confused by my discomfort. "It's part of you," he said. "It's sacred," as if violating my privacy was an act of devotion. I stared at the necklace, dangling between us like a question I didn't want to ask. I made an excuse. Said I felt sick. Said I needed air. He left without argument. But before he walked out, he said, "I made more than one." That part stuck, like a splinter you can't see, but still feel. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in my kitchen staring at my phone, thinking of all the times I'd left my cup in the bathroom, trusting the sanctity of my space. Thinking of how many times he'd watched me without me knowing. Thinking of the necklace, the red swirl, the way he looked at it. I texted him the next day, said I needed space. He didn't reply for 2 days. Then a message came, long and winding. He said he was misunderstood. Said people like him didn't belong in a world built for shallow love. Said intimacy meant sharing everything, even the uncomfortable parts. Said I was the only one who'd ever made him feel safe enough to be real. He didn't say sorry. I blocked him. But the messages kept coming. Not from him. From accounts with no photos, no followers, no names. One would send a picture of the necklace, followed by a heart emoji. Another would send a message, "Still mine." Then silence. Then more. I started locking my windows, double-checking the door. I kept the blinds closed. I stopped going to my favorite cafe because he knew I liked the corner seat. I changed my route to work. I deleted old tweets. I erased myself in pieces. My friends didn't know what to say. One asked if I was sure, if I'd imagined it, if maybe I'd overreacted. I showed her the photo, the necklace. She turned pale and said nothing. I started checking everything. My trash, my laundry, my bathroom, anything personal, anything he could twist into a token. Weeks passed, then months. The messages stopped. The fake accounts vanished. It was like he disappeared, or maybe moved on. I wonder if he kept the others, if he gave them to someone else. If there's a drawer somewhere full of tiny resin prisons, each holding a piece of someone who thought they were safe. I used to think intimacy was about closeness. Now I think it's about consent, about how much of yourself you give and how much someone takes. Mark didn't take my body. He took the parts one didn't know I was giving. The parts one left unguarded. The parts one thought no one would ever want. That's what haunts me. Not the blood, but the fact that someone thought it was theirs to keep. They say you don't remember days, only moments. If that's true, then I remember the moment I met her in the way you remember a half-formed dream, golden, quiet, and a little out of order. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor of a used bookstore, deep in the psychology section, flipping through a copy of something dense and dust-covered, the kind of book nobody reads unless they're trying to find something that's been lost in themselves. The late afternoon light spilled through the window like spilled tea, and her hair shimmered in it. I watched her for a second too long before pretending to look at the shelf beside her. She laughed when I made a joke about Freud and his cigar obsession, laughed like I had said the most brilliant thing in the world, even though it was stupid and probably recycled from a meme I saw years ago. Her name was Jessamine, but she told me to call her Jess, and the way she said it made it sound like a secret she was letting me in on. We got coffee 2 doors down, and she asked if she could sit on the same side of the booth. I said yes, though I didn't usually like that. She smelled like bergamot and old paper. A few hours later, we were eating pasta across a 2-top table at a place with flickering candles and a chalkboard menu. By morning, she was curled against my side in bed, her breathing syncing with mine like it had always been that way. It was too fast. It was reckless. It felt like stepping into a story that had already been written, and I was just catching up to the plot. She began leaving pieces of herself behind almost immediately. First a toothbrush, then a hoodie that smelled like rosemary and vanilla, then a drawer of odds and ends, lip balm, loose change, a book she said she couldn't read without crying. I let it happen. It didn't feel like invasion back then. It felt like someone choosing to stay. She made playlists for my commute. She brought me coffee with the exact right amount of cream and sugar, even though I don't remember ever telling her how I liked it. She remembered the name of my high school English teacher and the way I complained about my dad's half-finished basement. She was attentive in a way that felt like care. She watched me like I mattered. And then slowly, I began to realize she was watching me in a way that didn't feel like love. It started small, like all terrible things do. We were driving back from a quiet weekend at the beach. She was looking out the window, unusually silent, her fingers tracing fog on the glass. I remember thinking, is she bored of me already? Later that night, I got in my car to grab dinner, and as soon as the engine turned over, my phone's Bluetooth connected. A recording began to play. Not music. Not a podcast. Our voices. From the drive earlier. The exact conversation we'd had. Me complaining about traffic, her humming along to a song, The Silence. All of it, word for word. I paused it immediately, confused. Maybe she had recorded it by mistake. Phones do weird things. Technology has a mind of its own sometimes. I deleted it and didn't mention it. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But then it happened again. And again. Every time we were in the car together, a new voice memo would appear. Some labeled with dates, others with names. Drive to Mom's, Post Beach, rainy Tuesday. I didn't want to bring it up, but eventually I half joked, "Are you making a podcast of our relationship or something?" She smiled genuinely and said, "I just like listening back. I catch things I missed the first time. It helps me understand you better." The way she said it made it sound harmless. Sweet, even. But it didn't stop with the car. I began noticing files on my laptop, audio clips I never recorded, conversations from inside the apartment, watching movies, ordering food, laughing, whispering. One night, I found a folder on my desktop with my name. I hadn't created it. Inside were files, hundreds of them. Videos, audio, images, screenshots of texts, photos of me at work, at the gym, walking to the store, footage of me sleeping. One video showed me brushing my teeth. Another of us in bed. I hadn't given consent. I hadn't even known the camera was there. I felt my stomach twist into something that wasn't anger or sadness, but a quiet, consuming dread. I started tearing through the apartment like a man possessed, the bookshelf, the drawers, behind the TV. I found a tiny black lens inside a fake alarm clock. It was pointed directly at my bed. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I waited until she was in the shower and packed a bag. I left without saying anything, my heartbeat echoing in my ears like a warning bell I should have heard weeks before. I stayed at my brother's place. She didn't call, didn't text. The silence was worse than anything she could have said. A few days later, I returned to the apartment to collect the rest of my things. She wasn't home. I should have just grabbed my stuff and left, but curiosity is a sickness. I opened her laptop. I know I shouldn't have, but I did. There was a folder titled with my full name again. This one organized in subfolders: emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, conflict responses. There was a document with bullet points like a research journal. Pauses 3.5 seconds before answering emotionally loaded questions. Tone becomes clipped when discussing father. Responds well to physical touch post-disagreement. There were color-coded charts, graphs, a timeline of our entire relationship broken into stages. Strategies she had used. What worked? What didn't? Underlined phrases like positive reinforcement through music and daily touchpoints increase emotional dependency. I left everything behind. The furniture, the dishes, even the TV. I didn't want to take anything that might have been watching me. I blocked her on everything. Changed my number. Got a new apartment across the city. My brother helped me move. I told him it was a breakup, nothing more. But sometimes I wake up certain that I'm not alone. I find my shoes placed at a slightly different angle. My keys moved from their hook. The toothpaste cap turned tighter than I left it. Once I got into my car and the seat was shifted. Just an inch. Just enough to mean something. I told myself I was imagining it. Then one night, I opened my laptop. There was a new folder on the desktop. I hadn't made it. Inside, a single audio file. It was a recording of a phone call I had with my friend the day before. Our exact conversation. Word for word. I hadn't recorded it. I didn't even remember having my phone on speaker. I deleted it. I turned off my Wi-Fi. I unplugged everything. I sat in the dark. The glow of the screen burned into my retinas like a ghost that doesn't know how to leave.